Hello, everybody. My name is Toni Doolin. I'm the Dean of the Honors College at Oregon State University, and I'd like to welcome you all to our 2022 State of the College Address. This academic year marks the 27th year of having a degree-granting honors college at OSU. As I am joining all of you today from Corvallis, I'd like to start today's update by taking a moment to acknowledge that Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or the Ampinafu Band of the Kalapuya. Following the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed to reservations in Western Oregon. Today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. I welcome members of the Indigenous community who are joining us for today's session, and I acknowledge that work still lies ahead by learning more about Native American culture and creating and strengthening my own and OSU's connections with tribal nations. We share with you today a link in the chat to learn more about Oregon's tribal communities. A lot of this information was compiled by Dr. David Lewis, who's a faculty member here at Oregon State University. I also am so excited to see many familiar faces, and I've also noticed a handful of our students joining us for today, so thank you so much. For those of you who aren't tuned into the academic schedule, we are in week 10 of the 10-week term, and finals are looming ahead, so I appreciate students taking time out of their really busy weeks to join us. The other thing that I wanted to make note of is you may have, when you come in, or you may have noticed that we are recording this session, but the final session will be edited to remove any identifying information about anybody who's attending as guests before we share or post. But we do like to have this available as not everybody was able to join us today. Kevin, maybe next slide. Thank you. So over the last year, we focused on developing metrics to operationalize the goals that were laid out in the Honors College 2020 to 2025 strategic plan. In today's State of the College, I want to provide a summary of some of the outcomes and data that we have to share so that we can report on progress on these goals, but then also to speak really frankly about some of the areas where we need to continue to do work and we need to continue to focus on. I've organized my remarks to align with the 4 strategic priorities that are in our strategic plan and the 16 goals that are associated with the priorities that are embedded in the strategic plan. Since it would take longer than an hour that we have together today, I've identified a subset of the strategic goals to focus on in today's address. And it's really my objective that today's address is really a starting point for conversation. I think that Zoom affords a really wonderful opportunity for us to share this information broadly, but I recognize that Zoom is also not a great modality for deeper conversation, dialogue, and discussion. And so I would welcome the opportunity to connect with any of you outside of the time that we have today to provide updates on any of the goals that I don't cover, or to have a more robust discussion on any of the goals and the outcomes that I do cover. Next slide. So in the session today, I realize that not everybody's going to be familiar with the 2020 to 2025 Honors College Strategic Plan, although you can find a beautiful copy of it directly from our website under the About tab. But what I've done to try to kind of provide benchmarks for the conversation today is to include the text for each of the priorities as well as the goals. The other thing I'd like to say is, even though I have quite a few updates to provide, I would welcome any questions or comments that we have as we go along. Some things I may be addressing directly, but I may say something and you have some additional questions. And so you can feel free to put your questions in the chat, and then Kevin Stoller, who's on the call, is going to help me monitor that, and he'll stop me so that we can address anything that needs to be addressed before I move on in the conversation. Also, you can raise your electronic hand if you would like. So in your Zoom screen, you should see somewhere at the bottom of your screen a little smiley face with a plus sign on it. Under reactions, there's basically an icon that you can raise your hand. And again, we're happy to answer questions as we go along. I will also do my best to get through the information that I have so that we do have some time at the end for just kind of general questions or more open discussion. So within this first priority, if you look at this strategic priority, this is foundational not only to the Honors College, this idea of access, but really to who we are as a university and our vision and priorities as a university to make sure that a degree from an institute of higher ed is accessible to all of our students. And so this priority really mirrors the broader OSU mission. So within this priority, we have 5 different strategic goals that are embedded within it. And so today I'm going to talk about 4 of these, and I'm going to jump right into the first one, which is 1.1, which focuses on helping and supporting our students to really obtain the skills and perspectives that support not just their time at OSU, but what they do and when they leave OSU. Within the Honors College, we have 2 different learning outcomes. In brief, we refer to them as scholarly and engaged inquiry, and they're included on this slide that really talk to outcomes that we believe that will be obtained largely through experiences that students have as members of the Honors College. So the first set of data that I'm going to share related to the attainment of learning outcomes, we each year conduct an annual survey that we really want to understand how the different resources and how the different activities that we have embedded within the Honors College really support students obtaining these learning outcomes. And so the data that you're seeing on the screen right now comes from an annual survey that we conduct pretty much in the spring term of every academic year. And so these data were from students who were part of the Honors College in academic year 2021. And so that's the year that started in the summer of 2020 and concluded in the spring of 2021. In this particular academic year, which is the most recent year that we have the student survey results for, we had 427 surveys that were received, and this would have been out of approximately 1,500 to 1,600 students who were in the Honors College at that moment in time. And so we had about a 28% response rate. So it's certainly, for these sorts of surveys, a strong response rate. We always have to be careful because we do understand that when you don't have every student who replies, that you don't want to overinterpret the data that you have. The other thing that I want to make note of for the data I share today that come from the 2021 annual Honors College survey is academic year 2021 was a really unusual year, not just at OSU, but really across the world. So most of you may be aware that in 2021, all coursework at OSU, with very few exceptions, was offered remotely as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The thing I do want to clarify, though, is we still had many students who were living and studying in Corvallis and in Bend at our OSU Cascades campus. And this included students who lived in the residence halls on both of our campuses. But we also had a number of students who studied from homes and other locations outside of Corvallis. And so while we continued to offer a full set of honors courses, many of those courses were offered in a remote modality. The other thing is that our co-curricular activities that year, while we did a handful of things in the fall that were in person, the bulk of our co-curricular offerings really happened over Zoom to be able to include and support students regardless of how they were joining us as students at OSU in that particular year. The interesting thing to me is if I compare, for example, how different elements of the curriculum and the co-curricular activities we have contributed to learning outcomes, what we saw last year actually was quite similar to what we've seen in previous years. And so even though we had to change the modality, what we saw is that there were still really amazing and transformative opportunities that supported students engaged in scholarly inquiry in spite of the less than ideal modality. So some of the things that we've been working on and for is if you look at the scholarly inquiry, which is really supported through the Honors College thesis process, we have talked for a while about how it is that we can better support Honors College students in their thesis journey. And so we've done actually a ton of work over the last year, and I'll talk a little bit later about some of this work when we talk about the thesis specifically, but really trying to help students understand the thesis process and finding better ways to understand when a student isn't progressing quickly enough in that thesis process. I'm also really excited with the work that our advising team has done, and we've done some restructuring by adding a head advisor to our advising team to really increase our focus on the support that we provide and the conversations that we can have with students about the thesis process. For the engaged inquiry, I'm excited to announce that in the fall, we restructured the leadership team within the college to create 2 assistant dean positions that are structured in a way to really support students across the life cycle. So Gilda Cumming, one of our assistant deans, supports basically students from the point in time that they express interest in OSU through the admissions process all the way to the end of their first year as Honors College students. And then Kevin Stoller, our second assistant dean, supports students basically from the second year all the way through them becoming alumni. And so we really are hopeful that by having these 2 assistant dean roles that are going to be supported through 2 coordinator roles, that we really will be able to look at our co-curricular activities in a comprehensive way that's really aligned with students' progression at OSU and in the Honors College. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is the second goal within the strategic priority 1, which really looks at equalizing and working to increase honors thesis and degree completion across all student populations. And so one of the things that we track is the extent to which students are engaged with the thesis process. How are they progressing through that process? We have the thesis process structured, and we provide scaffolding for students, and we have these 4 stages that we want to see students progress through. On this slide, the acronym NYE stands for Not Yet Engaged. And so what we do is we basically look at what percentage of students, based on what year they are in their studies at OSU, how are they progressing through this 4-stage process? And that stage that's called proposal is really what we refer to as our 3rd stage. And so you'll see that we've done a decent job of getting our first-year students to engage in the stage 1 activity, which is just learning a little bit more about the thesis process. And again, we've enacted some pretty significant changes in stage 1 by creating a new course for stage 1 that is a required course for all incoming first years and transfer students. And so next year, I suspect that the percent that actually complete stage 1 will be much closer to 100% because it is now a requirement for our students. The other thing that I will say is these data that I'm presenting today are focused on first year students and not transfer students. There's another set of metrics associated with progress our transfer students make. But for a transfer student, they're really in that first year, if not the first term, trying to get through stage 1 and stage 2. You will see that our biggest opportunities really lie with helping our second and third year students engage in the thesis process. And so we've done some work with our metrics to actually try to capture sooner rather than later, as soon as students have identified a thesis mentor. And so hopefully by next year, I'll be able to provide a little more insight when students have not yet submitted their proposal, which is basically the contract between the student and a mentor about what they're going to do for their thesis, but they may be in conversations with a mentor and working to develop that. And that's really what we want to capture at the stage 2 level. The other thing that I will point out with these data is we do not see a significant difference in thesis progression for our URM or BIPOC students. And so that's a really good thing. In a lot of metrics in higher education, URM students will oftentimes lag behind non-BIPOC students in progression and in completion. So that's a really good thing for our community, but we still fundamentally have work to do, particularly around the second and third year students.
Tony, there's a question about how this might, a student's experience would be different if they came in with sophomore level status in their first year.
Yeah, and so the reality is nearly all of our first years, not nearly all, but a very high majority of our first year students actually do come into OSU as sophomores or juniors because they've completed AP, IB, or community college credits before they entered the university. That helps them in terms of their progression towards their academic degrees, but it really doesn't in any way set them apart or differentiate them when it comes to the thesis. Now, we know that some students do have an opportunity to write research papers or participate in science and other sorts of research-focused activities in high schools, but it's really teaching them how to connect with the research side of the university that we're working on in stage 1, and then identifying specific areas that they might want to work on in stage 2, and then actually defining what their work is going to look like in stage 3, and then completing that work in stage 4. And so regardless of a student's academic standing, they go through the process in the same way based on the year that they enter the honors college. So the other thing that we want to look at is just overall honors degree completion. And the honors college has grown over I think I have 5 years shown here, and the honors college has grown substantially in the last 5 years. Now, some of our growth has happened recently enough that students are not yet at the point of graduation. But this last year, we were very excited to graduate the largest number or confer the largest number of honors baccalaureate degrees that we've ever conferred. The way that the honors baccalaureate degrees are conferred, or there are actually 4 different types of degrees. So there's an honors Bachelor of Science, an honors Bachelor of Arts, an honors Bachelor of Fine Arts, and OSU recently introduced a Bachelor of Music. And so moving forward, at some point in time, we will have students that graduate with an honors Bachelor of Music. But the bulk of our students complete that honors Bachelor of Science, and it's a little hard to see on this graph, but there are a small number every year of students who, usually in the less than 5 range, who also complete their honors Bachelor of Fine Arts. And then, of course, we have a number of students who earn degrees in arts and so earn the HBA degree. One of the things that we do in our survey every year is we ask students, what is the greatest barrier to completing your honors degree? And I just use the acronym HBX to recognize that students earn different types of honors bachelor's degrees. And always, and these data, even though they came from last year, they're very consistent with what we've seen previously, that really the thesis is the largest barrier for a lot of students to honors degree completion. Thus, the huge investment that we're making both from an advising support perspective, as well as the new stage 1 course and some of the other changes in tracking progression. We also do have students that really struggle with the cost. I think most of you are aware that in students who are in the honors college pay something called differential tuition as part of being a student in the honors college, which the bulk of that tuition is used to hire the faculty who teach the honor sections of the courses. But that differential tuition can be a barrier to students staying in the honors college, thus a barrier to completing their honors degree. And then you can see some of the other reasons that students give for being unable to complete the HBX. And there's a lot more detail under some of these. And this is an example of something that we could have a very long conversation just about this topic. But again, for the purposes of this address, just want to provide kind of a high level update of what's going on. And also help to clarify why some of the strategic goals that we have around thesis completion and around supporting students financially are so important to us. The third goal subsumed within the strategic priority 1 is looking at scholarships to support our students with significant financial need. And so on the next slide, we regularly, when students withdraw from the honors college, so these are students who are still at OSU, still plan to complete their OSU degree, but decide that they no longer want to be part of the honors college. We have tracked why it is that students leave the Honors College. And you will see that in spring of 2021, for all students who left in AY21, the greatest 38% of the students, which translated to about 108 total of the 288 students who left the Honors College, 38% of them cited cost as the major factor for their decision to leave the Honors College. And so this is something we've been focused on for a long time. You will see that even as we've grown substantially in the last 4 years, the percent of students who've cited cost as a factor has decreased substantially, but we still have work to do in this area. And the next slide provides a little bit of data on how we're trying to address this specific issue. So we created something called a differential tuition scholarship. I think it was 6 years ago now. Is that right? Yeah, 6 years ago now. And this slide just shows some of the summary information about the differential tuition scholarships that we award. So for AY22, we were able to award $233,000 in differential tuition scholarships to 191 students. This translates to about $1,200 on the average of basically a tuition scholarship. The total cost of differential tuition is $1,500 per academic year, and this is the same for in-state or out-of-state students. So at this point in time, we're able to support about 22% of our students that have high or medium levels of financial need based on FAFSA or ORSA submissions. I will say that one of the things that we have learned is that there are students who, from a FAFSA, which is the federal free financial aid form that students complete, oftentimes the FAFSA doesn't capture accurately a student's true financial need. So we have students, for example, who might have families that are unable or choose to not support a student's higher education journey. The thing that I'm really proud of is in our differential tuition scholarship process, in addition to their FAFSA information, students can also provide additional information about their financial situation. And so what we believe to be the case is about 35% of Honors College students have significant financial need. And so if we want to fully meet those, fully provide differential tuition scholarships to students with higher medium levels of need, we anticipate that annually we would have to award somewhere around $800,000 in differential tuition scholarships. And so while it's wonderful that this year we were able to offer $233,000 to these students, we still have significant work to do to be able to fully meet this need. And I think at that point, we would start to see a substantial decline in students who indicate that cost is the reason that they've chosen to withdraw from the Honors College. Next slide. And so I think this is the final goal that I'm going to talk about under strategic priority 1. And this is really looking at trying to make sure that the co-curricular offerings that we provide for students really support all students. And so this is just a graph that basically shows participation in different types of co-curricular opportunities that we had this last year based on whether or not students are first year, second year, third years, or fourth years. And the reason we use that terminology instead of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior is, as I said earlier, a lot of our students, first year students, for example, actually have academic standing as sophomores and juniors because of the transfer credit that they bring in with them. But you'll see that even though we had to engage with students in a remote sort of way throughout much of AY21, that we did see really strong engagement, particularly in our first years. And then you can see a little more in second years. We continue to struggle with getting our third and fourth year students actively connecting with and engaging with our co-curricular opportunities. And some of that is us figuring out what sort of programming is most meaningful and impactful to students. Having said that, though, a lot of our third and fourth year students are very engaged because of their thesis process. And so it's as well as taking honors courses. The next slide just is a summary of all of the different co-curricular opportunities that we offered in AY21. And I just want to shout out to members of HCSA, which is our Honors College Student Association, and members of the Honors College team who are on in this session today, because this was a heavy lift. Figuring out how to provide co-curricular programming in this remote modality was not easy. And there were times when it was really frustrating because students really wanted to have connections, and figuring out how to do that in Zoom and other ways was quite challenging. But our students, as well as our staff, were just amazingly resilient in this effort. And this list is really, really impressive to see all the different things that happen. Some of these are events that we do or used to do and are back to doing in person, and we were able to figure out how to do these remotely. And in some cases, we were able to figure out how to maintain some of our activities in person, but adhering to all of the guidelines that existed for how we did in-person events. So now I'm going to move on to the second strategic priority, which really looks at building and creating a community that's inspirational to all students. Within strategic priority 2, we have 4 different goals, and today I'm going to talk about the progress in 3 of those 4 areas. I am going to catch up on my notes here just to make sure I'm in the right place. One of the things that we look at is trying to figure out if we have barriers to students actually applying to the Honors College, becoming admitted to the Honors College, and then actually joining the Honors College. So it's matriculation into the Honors College. Right now, I will say up front that one of our biggest opportunities in terms of admissions and matriculation is that at this moment in time, eCampus students, so these are students who are part of OSU's degree programs that are offered asynchronously and fully online. eCampus students do not have a pathway to the honors baccalaureate degree. And I'm super excited to report that with a lot of work from Sue and other faculty, we've been able to submit a curriculum proposal, and we're hopeful that by fall of 2022 that we will actually have approval to start admitting eCampus students into the Honors College. What I'm showing now is the number of students who have applied to the Honors College. And so what these numbers represent is the number of applicants received in a particular academic year, but these students wouldn't actually start in the Honors College until the following year. And so you'll notice for 2022, while it might look like there's a slight decline, these are actually the applicant numbers as of early February 2022, and that application process is still underway. So we fully anticipate that we will have more applicants than we saw last year, but we won't have the final numbers on that until later this academic year. And so we're really proud of the work that has been done to really make students more aware of the opportunity to apply to the Honors College. I will also say that we've done a tremendous amount of work in the last couple of years, and particularly over this last year, to make sure that COVID didn't get in the way of students applying to the Honors College. So we were able to work with the Honors Curriculum Council a year and a half ago to get approval to allow students to apply to petition for admissions to the Honors College if they did not meet the GPA or testing score minimum criteria. The reason behind this is many students were unable to complete any tests like the SAT or ACT. The other reason is that many students for the entirety of their junior or part of their senior year didn't receive grades at all. So many high schools in the nation moved to basically pass, no pass grading in response to the pandemic. And so it was really important for us to be able to give students an opportunity to basically tell us their story and then to be able to consider their applications. So for both the 2021 and the current admission cycle, in addition to students who meet the admissions minimums, we also are reviewing and considering and admitting students who don't meet the minimums but have applied through this petition process. The next goal I want to go through is really working to make sure that students in the Honors College experience our community as inclusive of diverse perspective, goals, and interests. This is fully aligned again with work that's being done across the university. For the data for this particular metric, I'm going to go back to that survey data that I talked about. So one of the things that we do is we ask students to tell us how much they agree or disagree with statements about their connection to the Honors College community and whether or not being part of the Honors College community is something that's helpful to them and whether or not they feel like it's a community that they actually belong in. And one of the things that I'm excited about, again, AY21 was a challenging year because we weren't in person for pretty much the entirety of the academic year. And yet we saw really strong improvement in the number of students who agreed with these statements about being satisfied with the Honors College community. So between 2020 and 2021, we saw a 10% increase in students who either strongly agreed or agreed with the statement that they were satisfied to be part of the community. We saw a 20% increase in students who said it was important to be part of the community, a 13% increase in students who strongly agreed or agreed, saying that being part of the community is good for them, and then a 15% increase in students who indicated that the Honors College community is a place where they belong. And so that's particularly good given the challenges of creating community in a hybrid world. In the next slide, however, we point out some of the places where we have work to do. And that is that not all students feel the same. And so when we look at these data and we disaggregate the data based on socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, religion, race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, and ability, disability, what we find is there are certain populations of our students who are who basically don't experience interactions within the Honors College as positively as other students do. And so, for example, we've seen a trend actually for about the last 3 or 4 years where students who have a lower socioeconomic status oftentimes feel left out when they're part of the Honors College community. Similarly, in the past, non-gender conforming biases and ableism were reported to us by students. So these are definitely places where we continue to have work to do. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. So to me, goal 2.3 and 2.4, that we really communicate and convey our values in the work that we do as a college and the way we interact. And so what I've chosen to share in reporting on goal 2.4 are some of the comments that came from this last year's survey. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and give you all a chance to read those. So as somebody who's been engaged in research that uses both quantitative and qualitative data, I will say that there is definitely work based on these qualitative data and similar that are in the results of the survey that really show us that we need to clarify through our actions and how we support students that our values in the Honors College of Inclusive Excellence and this value of working and growing together, these are places where we still have work to do. I'm super excited to say that we've got three different subgroups as part of our student leadership circle, really working on some efforts to think about the diversity within our community and creating an inclusive community. And so really working with our students directly on how do we make progress in this area. So now I'm going to jump into looking at some of the goals that are part of Strategic Priority 3. And the idea with Strategic Priority 3 is that we really want experiential learning to be accessible to all of our students. Most of you are aware, to earn that honors baccalaureate degree, students are involved in scholarship and research at the university, and that's a required element of the Honors College degree, and that's basically the work that they do on their thesis. But we'd really like to see students being able to engage with other types of experiential learning opportunities in their time at Oregon State. So I'm going to talk today about two of the goals within Strategic Priority 3. And so the first one is 3.1. And this is, how do we make sure that all of our students have the resources they need, the mentorship they need, and the support that they need so that they complete their honors theses? And so we look at and we measure basically where are students at in making progress. And so we have these different stages about basically looking at have the students completed the stage 1, the stage 2 courses, the stage 3 courses, or the work associated with those that I talked about previously. But then we look at where they're at in their progression. And again, as you will see, we have the biggest opportunity working with our second and third year students and making sure that they're making progress towards their thesis degrees. I'm excited that we've engaged in conversations, particularly in units where we know that we have lower thesis completion rates, and really engaging with faculty and how do I identify students who are struggling to find a thesis mentor. And the reality is for most students, once they find a thesis mentor, they're really well on their way to completing their honors college thesis. But sometimes it can be intimidating to reach out to a faculty member. Some students are really unsure about what they want to focus on for their thesis work. And so there's all sorts of reasons that it can be difficult for students to identify thesis mentors. I will also say that in AY21, it was even more challenging than normal because you couldn't just stop by a faculty member's office. You basically had to reach out to a faculty member, schedule a Zoom call, right? So there was definitely more overhead in connecting with mentors or potential mentors in this last year. Next slide. And so one of the things that we looked at in the AY21 survey, and this is a word cloud, and so the bigger the font is, basically the more times that a particular phrase was shared with us by students as how could we better support students with respect to the thesis. And it's interesting that even students recognize that they need more structure. And so we really think that our addition of a really intensive required first stage course for focusing on the honors college thesis will be really helpful. Finding mentors, we know that historically that's been challenging. Mixers are just a mechanism that we have of connecting students with faculty who are actively engaged in research at OSU. And then again, the changes that we've made and the work that our advising team is doing to make sure that they identify students who are struggling, and then in a one-on-one basis, really supporting them in whatever part of the process they're stuck. When we ask students what the biggest barriers are, you know, this idea that it's really hard to balance against everything else they're trying to do at OSU, so that's not surprising. We do have some students who have a sense that the thesis is unnecessary. And so one of the things that we've been focusing on in the new stage 1 course is helping communicating with students the value of engaging in research and scholarship, even if it might not change what they do in their first job, some of the skills and the professional development that are a direct result of participating and undertaking a project the size that a thesis is, and doing that hard work of documenting the research and the scholarship in a written thesis. So again, not big surprises, but it's interesting to see from a student perspective what we need to do to support them better and what are the things that are getting in the way.
So there's a question about expanding who is eligible to be a faculty mentor to potentially even include graduate students to address that problem.
Yeah, so graduate students actually are oftentimes involved in supporting honors college theses. They cannot serve as thesis mentors, but they can, and they absolutely do serve on thesis committees. And I would say, particularly in colleges with where you have pretty large research groups, oftentimes the graduate students are actively involved and mentoring the student, but that is done under the advisement of a faculty member, because at the end of the day, graduate students are themselves still students and learning what it means to be a scholar, learning what it means to be a researcher in their field. But we regularly see graduate students as committee members for honors theses. It also serves as a wonderful opportunity for graduate students to learn how to mentor students through the research process. So one of the other things that we look at is where are students at in terms of finding a thesis mentor? And again, this is because we know that once students have a mentor, they basically nearly all complete their honors thesis. And what we see is definitely, if we look at third years, which is the point where we really think that students should have a mentor, we do see variation across the different colleges. So these acronyms on the table on the right are basically the different colleges: ag science, earth, ocean, atmospheric sciences, liberal arts, business, engineering, forestry, science, and public health and human sciences. What I get really concerned about is the 5th and 6th year students who will presumably be completing, who with only 67% have a mentor that we know about. So again, one of the changes we've made this year is to actually track as soon as a student has a mentor. We used to basically not know they had a mentor until they submitted their proposal. So in some cases, students actually do have mentors. They just haven't gone through the formal step of submitting their proposal. And so hopefully by next year, we'll have a clearer picture of how many students really in their 4th and 5th and 6th years really don't have a mentor. And those are the students we need to focus resources on. So for the final goal in strategic priority 3, looking at, again, not just the thesis opportunity, but making sure that students have the support systems that they need to participate in experiential learning outside of the thesis. And so this might be service learning, this might be global opportunities, it might be internships and other sorts of things. So we have historically provided experiential learning scholarships, because one of the unfortunate things is a lot of experiential learning opportunities have price tags associated with them. Study abroad, you have to find a way to actually get to the location that you're going to be studying. Even something as simple as being an intern at the Oregon State legislative sessions. A student has to have enough money to basically drive back and forth between Corvallis to pay for their gas or their car to get from Corvallis to Salem. For many students, if they take on internships like that that are unpaid, they're actually having to not work a job on campus that they might be working. And so the idea behind our experiential learning scholarships is giving students an opportunity to participate, even though they may not have the financial resources. You'll notice that in 2021, there was a decrease in the number of, or the dollars that we paid out for experiential learning. This was in part due to the fact that many experiential learning opportunities were canceled or basically delayed or just couldn't happen because of the pandemic. And then the 2022 numbers are in process, so it's not for the whole academic year yet. I've listed on the next slide some of the different ways in which students have participated in experiential learning within the Honors College, but we do have a lot of different ways to engage. The other thing that I would say is that we try to be super mindful about how do we create experiential learning opportunities that don't have really big price tags. So as we think about what we do as an honors college, how do we make sure that students have an opportunity to learn through hands-on experiences and do that in ways where they don't have to pay additional monies for that? And then finally, from our annual survey, we do ask students, did they participate in any experiential learning? And this is a huge shift from previous years. And again, a direct result of the pandemic. And so typically we will have closer to 70% of students saying, yes, they had a chance to participate in experiential learning, but we had only 30% of students in the AY21 survey. And again, not surprising because of the situation that we're in. Most of you are aware that, and actually to go to the next slide, COVID, remote learning, nearly all study abroad programs, for example, were canceled. A lot of internships, opportunities to actually do practicums or to shadow folks in different environments, like in healthcare settings, were basically just eliminated last year. So definitely a challenging year. And so I'm going to wrap up talking a little bit about our final strategic priority, number 4. This particular strategic priority is quite different than anything that existed in our previous strategic plan. And it's one that we're continuing to work on both the metrics for, as well as trying to figure out how we progress in this area. But one of the things that we've heard from our stakeholders regularly over the years is that the Honors College certainly serves Honors College students, but it also has this bigger and important mission of really supporting all the work that goes on at OSU. And so all of these goals are really meant to think about what is our impact and how do we measure that impact and how do we increase our impact beyond just what we do internally within the college. And so today I'm going to address 3 of the 4 goals within strategic priority 4. So the first one is just increasing the size of the Honors College. And so our goal for about the last 4 years has been to eventually get to a point where the Honors College students are 7% of all undergraduate students being enrolled at OSU. And you can see that the college itself has grown tremendously over the last 15 years. These data are all taken from our institutional research data, and we collect enrollments at week 4 of fall term. And so even though the number of students in the college is larger than what's reflected in these, we always have a number of engineering students that are on internships in fall term. This is a consistent way to look at enrollments. Next slide. At this moment in time, we're about 5.6% of the OSU undergraduate population. Like I said earlier, we're really excited. In another year, we will start to also see enrollments of eCampus students, which are an important and increasingly important and large component of the undergraduate population. You will also see that our enrollments vary significantly by college. And so we are undertaking efforts with some of the colleges that have much lower percentage of students in the Honors College, trying to figure out how to get those students to apply. And because we have the transfer pathway into the Honors College, actually encouraging current OSU students to consider applying for and joining the Honors College as second year or sometimes even third year students. So we're making progress, but we still have work to do in the growth category. I'm going to jump to goal 4.3, which is this effort to really look at how do we have positive and deep engagement with families, alumni, community, and business leaders. And this has been an area that we focused on significantly. In the last year that was completed, which is the 20 to 21 year, we, in spite of being remote, we were able to host and support 63 different events, and we engaged with over 586 unique attendees. This year, our numbers are small, but that's because we're not quite through with the year. And so in early February, we had already hosted 46 events, and we had already engaged with 216 unique individuals. But on the next couple of slides, I just want to make folks aware of what's coming up. And you'll see that our spring engagement calendar is very full. So we have a number of dean and friends, and these are mostly OSU alumni, but in our C-suite, which is basically individuals who are CIOs, CEOs, COOs, we have a unique set of guests coming in to speak to students about making that transition into senior leadership roles that we're super excited about. We are headed back out to Boston for the first time in a couple years. We actually just got back from networking events in Austin and Dallas, Texas that were really wonderful. And thanks to any of you who were on the call who were attended those events. We're actually doing for the first time ever a networking event with a specific company because we have so many OSU and Honors College alumni at that company. And then I do want to give a shout out on the 27th of April. We'll have our third day of giving, and I hope all of you are able to participate in that. And then we, of course, have our amazing parent and family leadership circle, and we have meetings coming up. And as we go into May, it doesn't get any quieter. We have additional networking events. For those of you who are on the call, we're really excited to do an in-person portal event, which is going to be a really exciting topic that will be shared in the coming weeks, and that will be up in Portland. And then I'm going to wrap up, and there'll be a few minutes for questions. In goal 4.4, one of the things that we've wanted to do for a long time is to really be able to answer the questions that we often get asked from current and prospective students and family members. What happens to Honors College alum after they graduate from OSU? And so we actually have an engagement with Hanover Research, where we're doing 4 different projects to actually look at how many of our students go on to graduate school and professional school, and actually make sure that we have contact information, up-to-date contact information for Honors College alum, both those who graduated with the Honors College degree and those who were part of the Honors College but didn't necessarily complete their honors degree. And so I'm super excited, and by this time next year, I should be able to give some updates as a result of that. But really understanding what role did the Honors College experience have in alumni in terms of having hopefully a positive impact on the work that they're now doing and how they contribute both professionally as well as in their communities. And with that, I am done with my remarks. And so I know we don't have a ton of time, but would be more than happy to try to answer any questions that you might have based on the information presented or based on information I didn't talk about. Okay, we do have a question from Carrie. You talk about increasing enrollment, but what about increasing professors to teach honors classes? So yeah, I didn't report any data around that, but we offer, and Sue is here so she can correct me if I'm wrong, but we offer about 400 honors sections of courses, and the number of faculty who teach for us has grown tremendously over the last 5 years as we've increased course offerings. I'm super excited to report that the Honors College Council, which is the Faculty Senate appointed committee of faculty, and we also have student members on that, recently worked with us to update the policy of who automatically qualifies to teach and mentor Honors College students to include all professorial ranks rather than just including those that are tenured line, tenured track faculty, to also include clinical faculty, professors of practice, and sometime down the road if OSU creates professors of teaching. But for anybody who doesn't meet the automatic qualifications based on the particular position they have at OSU, there is a petition process that Sue manages with the curriculum committee, and folks can basically petition to either be a mentor and or teach an honors college class. So Carrie, I don't know if that answered that question, but definitely we've had to increase. And I know that Sue has put together great training as we welcome new faculty into the Honors College to help them learn about the pedagogical approach that we use in honors and other things that are unique to teaching and mentoring in the college. Thank you, Vicki, on the comment on the thesis requirement. And we do believe it's, what we know from alumni is the thesis is almost always what students say was the most transformational part of being in the Honors College at the point of graduation. It was really cool at our Dallas reception. We had a 2021 alum who spoke, an Honors College alum, and she talked about she was hesitant to join the Honors College in part because she didn't view herself as a good writer. And she was worried that she would be unsuccessful in the thesis because she couldn't write. And she said, she somehow had the courage to join the Honors College and got through the thesis process, and said for her, it was really validating. It basically proved to herself that she did have the skills to undertake that sort of project and to document that in writing. It was, I can't say it as eloquently as she did, but it was and continues to be what we hear from students. The thesis is transformative. We just can't always convince 18 and 19-year-olds that taking on that piece of work is a really good decision. Somebody asked about the GPA requirement for enrolling and maintaining. So the GPA requirement is 375 for students who apply out of high school unweighted. For maintaining, so once you're at OSU, the OSU minimum GPA is 325, but we do work, and again, kudos to the environment. When a student falls below that 325, they will work with their Honors College advisor to basically come up with a plan to help them increase that GPA so that they can stay within the Honors College. And we've actually restructured, again, thanks to our advising team, the way in which we work with students who aren't meeting these progression requirements. And I will say that what they put together is really foundational on how do we support students and move them forward while having honest conversations about how realistic it is for them to complete the honors degree. So really important work, and again, driven by our advising team. Thank you all for joining us. And again, thanks to our students, and I should acknowledge the faculty are here in such a busy time of the term. Again, feel free to reach out to me directly or anybody on the honors team. So have a great afternoon, or for some of you who might be on the East Coast, have a great evening.